Hello everyone, welcome to the news desk. Rich Hagan alongside Hall of Famer Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, welcome along here on day one lunchtime as we set aside 40 cards and we shuffle up 60 or indeed 75. So, first question, how different is the new standard about to be?
It's going to be very different. You're going to see a lot more really linear decks that just are trying to enact a very specific game plan, and that game plan does not always involve interacting with the opponent. In fact, in many cases, it specifically involves not interacting with the opponent.
So let's just de-jargonify for a moment. When you say a linear deck, you mean it has a plan, which is it goes straight, it doesn't wiggle around?
Extremely single-minded, extremely narrow focus, and it's completely built to further that game plan and not built to do much outside of it.
So what's the advantages of a linear game plan?
If it's a good game plan, which hopefully you've got a good one, then your deck's very good at enacting it, and in a lot of cases, it can cut off a lot of the different ways your opponent can interact with it.
Okay, so an example might be if I'm an aggressive red deck, I might have 12 or even 16 one-drops, and they're somewhat interchangeable because the game plan, the linear game plan, is a one-drop on turn one, followed by a two-drop on turn two. And so you must have a critical mass at each slot along the way of the linear plan. Is that fair?
It also means that all the cards in your deck supplement that plan. Like this deck we're talking about has a lot of burn spells, it has a lot of cheap creatures, and all of them work together. It also makes it so a lot of the cards in your opponent's deck don't matter. Their 6-mana spells, largely irrelevant.
Okay, all of those are good news for being linear. What's the downside?
The downside is if your opponent's good at attacking you, then you're going to be disrupted. If your whole game plan involves getting out, say, a Metalwork Colossus, and your opponent's very good at killing your artifacts on the way, you're not going to have a good time. The other downside is that if you're a linear game plan, you're not interactive, and your opponent's faster than you, you're kind of out of luck.
Okay, so Luis won't say this, so I'll say it for him. He doesn't know absolutely everything, and this is just a preview of the new standard. So we're going to bring you 6 sort of sets of cards that we think work well together, that, Luis, you've identified as a group of things. Now, quite what the players do with them, we'll have to find out over the next 4 or 5 rounds. So why don't we start off with a card that has, well, very, very big hype coming in. This is Smuggler's Copter, and we've grouped it together with Thraben Inspector, Gnarlwood Dryad, and Insolent Neonate. So what's going on?
Well, this is definitely not a deck. I'm not predicting red, green, white Smuggler's Copter. What I'm looking at here is Smuggler's Copter, undeniably one of the most powerful and influential cards in the new set, plus a sampling of 1-mana creatures which help enable that. So you're looking at Thraben Inspector representing, say, red-white vehicles, which is a deck we're definitely going to see a lot of. Gnarlwood Dryad representing green-black Delirium, which often uses Smuggler's Copter in order to fuel Delirium and beat down the opponent. And then Insolent Neonate, which combines with Smuggler's Copter and cards like Prized Amalgam to put together a very aggressive graveyard-based strategy.
So when we see, if we see, lots of Smuggler's Copters in play, that's because it fits in so many places.
It's a cheap artifact, it's colorless, and all that it requires is you have other cheap creatures, which every color can actually provide.
Is it sufficiently important to what we're guessing may be a metagame that people are already thinking this is a card I have to be actively either sideboarding for or be thinking about how am I dealing with any of those into a Smuggler's Copter? Is that a big key part of what teams were talking about?
Definitely. If you're trying to play a longer game, you need ways to kill Smuggler's Copter, which kind of eliminates sorcery speed removal in many cases, or you have to be playing a deck that just goes over the top of Smuggler's Copter decks completely and is trying to either outrace them or trump their plan with something bigger.
All right, so let's move on. Let's see whether this next group sort of works together. This is Electrostatic Pummeler, Bristling Hydra, Larger Than Life, and then on the end you've got Uncaged Fury. This looks a little more coherent.
Right, to draw a comparison, this red-green Electrostatic Pummeler deck plays kind of like the modern Infect decks, where you're just trying to add up to 20. Yeah, maybe not 10 because you don't actually deal poison damage, but 20. And the way you do it is cards like Electrostatic Pummeler and Bristling Hydra combined with Larger Than Life, Uncaged Fury, Blossoming Defense, and Built to Smash.
Okay, so just leaving those 4 up on screen for a minute, if we just do some quick math, I'm at 1/1, I've got a bunch of mana, so I've got Larger Than Life, so I give it +4/+4. Now it's at 5 already. Then I Uncaged Fury it, so now it's 6/6 and Double Strike. That's 12. So then let's say I've cast 1 Hydra, and that's, just for the sake of argument, my only energy. So I put that into my electrostatic pummeler. That doubles it up. It's now a 12-12 double strike. Well, that's more than 20.
And trample, because larger than life and built to smash both provide trample on the pummeler. So this deck can add up to 20 or more very, very quickly. It's not uncommon for this deck to deal like upwards of 60 damage given enough energy, because it has a bunch of different energy sources, pummeler, and a bunch of different pump spells.
And this is very much what you're talking about with a linear strategy.
Right. This deck has 0 to 2 ways to interact with the opponent's creatures, maybe a couple harness lightnings. Other than that, it's just trying to stack up all its cards and attack for 1,000,000.
Okay, let's move on. Let's have a look at Veteran Motorist, Depala, Pilot Exemplar, Fleet Wheel Cruiser, and Sky Sovereign Console Flagship. Bum, bum, bum.
Secretly, Smuggler's Copter's here too, but we already took a look at that. And
Right.
This is the red-white vehicles deck.
Sure.
It's going to go sometimes up the curve all the way to Sky Sovereign, but in other cases, it's going to be a little lower to the ground. Either way, this deck is trying to pilot a bunch of vehicles, attack the opponent, and have pretty good card quality while doing so.
This is the deck that absolutely every player in the room knows about coming in, right?
If this wasn't in your gauntlet, you did not do your due diligence preparing for the Pro Tour.
Right, because Chris Van Meter won an event in week 1 of Standard with this deck. So this was just straight up, I'm either going to play it or I'm going to work out what my plan is against.
Definitely, it's one of the more popular decks on Magic Online. It's the natural home for Smuggler's Copter, and that's just one of the best cards. So you will have prepared against red-white vehicles.
Now, there are a ton of Kaladesh cards being used in New Standard, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact there are some really excellent cards from other sets that are still going to be very important. Let's take a look at our next set of 4. We've got Grim Flayer, Sylvan Advocate, Tireless Tracker, and then, yes, we are a bit new, here's Verdurous Gearhulk.
So these kind of represent a sampling of the Black-Green Delirium cards, and not all the Black-Green Delirium decks are going to play Gearhulk. Some are going to play Copter, some aren't. But Grim Flayer is kind of a centerpiece of these decks. It's still interacting with the graveyard. It's still using Grapple at the Past. Sometimes they go all the way to Emrakul. They often traverse the Ulvenwald, and it just turns out these just like high-quality green and black cards still combine in a pretty good way.
Is this the sort of format, though, where your kind of grindy-ish, mid-range-ish struggles against to be good against all of the linear strategies? Because somewhere there's a hole, surely.
Definitely. When you have a deck like these, Grim Flayer, Black-Green Delirium decks, you're not going to be fast enough to outrace all the linear strategies, and some people are going to go over the top, and they're going to be interacting in a way that you can't really stop. Your Grasp of Darkness does not line up well against, say, Aetherworks Marvel.
That doesn't sound like this is a great place to be, then.
Well, it depends. This deck has some strengths against like the decks like Red-White. So if enough people show up with those, then you end up with slightly bigger creatures, slightly higher on the curve, and that's where you want to be.
And so you're hoping that, as we've just said, the whole room knows about Red-White, that
Right.
maybe a lot of them come on to Red-White, and then that's your kind of next leveling kind of idea. All right, let's move on. Now, this one excites me quite a lot. So that's the Grim Flayer. Here is Metalwork Colossus, plus some other cards.
This is definitely my favorite deck coming into the Pro Tour. The combo here being playing a bunch of non-creature artifacts, making Metalwork Colossus cost 0. Playing Colossus, it still triggers Sanctum of Ugin, which then lets you sacrifice it to get another Colossus, play a second Colossus, or you can get Elder Deep Fiend if that's more your style. But there are a lot of cool things going on with this deck. Hedron Archive and Prophetic Prism, cards like Metal Spinner's Puzzle Knot, Panharmonicon. Vehicles, notably, do not count as creatures when they're not crewed, so
Right.
you have cards like Sky Sovereign or Cultivator's Caravan, which will make Metalwork Colossus cheaper. And this deck's really, really fun to play. Also, it's actually good. There are a number of copies of it in the tournament.
Okay, 10-10 is something obviously we can get behind. 2 words that aren't on that card: trample, flying. So is 10-10 enough?
The combination of Colossus and Elder Deep Fiend is often how you're going to set up this kill, because Elder Deep Fiend will tap your opponent down, tap their lands for a turn so they can't play a sweeper, or tap out their blockers, and then your 1 or 2 Colossi will finish the job.
Okay, so basically the answer is, yeah, 10-10's enough. Okay, let's move on. And another very, very cool set of interactions going on. And this centers around Aetherworks Marvel. You see a couple of puzzle knots there, the blue and the green. I imagine that's not coincidental. And then, yeah, I think we've seen Emrakul before. So what's going on here, Luis?
When this deck works well, it feels like the most unfair deck in the format. You've got Eitherworks Marvel, you're trying to get up to 6 energy, and there's so many ways to get there. Tune with Either, the blue and green puzzle knots, Either Hub helps a little bit. Cards like Either Meltdown or Either Theorist or Either this or Either that, either or, and you get to play Eitherworks Marvel, use it, and then hit either Emrakul or Ulamog, or in some cases Kozilek, depending on how deep you want to go.
So, of those 6, well, 5 plus some variation on a Smuggler's Cocktail and getting there. If you were sleeving up Standard right now, which our players are doing, what would you be on?
I think I'd be on the Colossus deck, but I would have needed to vet it a little bit more. I know it's by far my favorite deck.
All right, well, that's our preview, and it's time to get down to the action.